Grades seem to be very important in school, and that's why I want to talk about the question if grades are relatively unimportant today and based on the scientific evidence, the scientific facts we have so far. Why do we have grades? There are several arguments for and against grades. There are some arguments for grades, which is that they give orientation to the students, they measure performance, they are a way of comparing the performance between students. That grades motivate is another argument for grades, and that students learn to deal with failure, and that school grades have proven their worth. Arguments against grades are that grades create pressure, that they depend on the teacher, they are demotivating, and they lead to a fear of making mistakes instead of focusing on progress and giving their best. Students are worried about making mistakes, and this has an effect as well on their grades. And another big argument is that many countries have already replaced grades successfully, for example, Finland. What are the facts? If we look at the scientific studies that have been done in regards to grades at school, we know that grades do not meet the three criteria, which are objectivity, that is, are they independent from the assessor, reliability, do they measure reliably, and validity, do they measure only what they aim to measure. What influences grades? These scientific studies that have been done since the 1970s and even earlier on as well have shown that grades depend on a variety of factors. And some of the factors that influence the grade are the teacher themselves. So the mood, the intention, the beliefs of a teacher. If a teacher believes that it's important that students struggle and that they have to work hard to receive a good grade. And a teacher believes that, students should be rewarded for trying hard, for giving their best. The teacher who believes that, grades should be hard work will give less or fewer good grades than a teacher who believes that, that uses the grades to motivate and to reward the students. What is also important is that the level of the class is important, so the performance level, which means if a good student is in a class that is very strong academically, this student will be worse than if the student were in a class where the academical performance of the rest of the group is rather weak. It's also the other way around. So if you have a student who is academically weak, they are in a group that is very academically strong, their grades will be worse than if they were in a group of students, amongst a group of students whose performance is academically weaker. Preliminary information about the students could be seen that it's also a big factor. So they tested this by giving teachers information about the student, and then they gave them the work of a student, and they had the teachers decide what grade would you give to the student, and they tested it in a way that they gave information. For example, they said, oh yeah, this is an A+ student, and the other teachers they gave the information that it's a D- student. And the results were that the teachers who got the positive information that the student was a very good student gave a much better grade than the teachers, on average, than the teachers who received this information that the student was a D- student. Important to add is that basically the work of the student was the same. So it was just the information that the teachers were given that influenced the result. The same is true, or another factor that influences grades is the order of the examinees, which means they tested this in an oral exam, and you could see that. So if you're number 5 in the order of when you are taking your oral exam, and the 4 students in front of you were very good students, had good presentation, had strong performances, your performance was worse than, in terms of grades, than if the 4 students in front of you had bad and poor performances. The time of measurement could be seen that it was a factor, which means they tested this. They gave a test or a work from a student to teachers, and they ask the teachers, you just have to tell me if it's pass or fail, and then they recorded the results, and 6 months later they gave the same teachers the same work. I think it was an essay, and what came out is that 50% of the teachers changed their opinion from pass to fail and from fail to pass. Sympathy is another factor that influences grades, the sex of a student as well, so if it's a boy or a girl, and the social origin as well, which means when they tested it like this, so they used an essay, and they gave one group of teachers the information that the student comes from an academic household where both parents are doctors, and the other group of teachers, they gave the information that the student comes from a working class environment, that the dad is working in the factory and the mother is staying at home as a housewife. And what could be seen is it was the same essay basically, but the teachers who got the information that the student was growing up in an academic household got much better grades on average than the group of teachers that were informed that the student is coming from a working class background. So what are the results if we summarize this? Grades are not scientifically valid. Grades are not comparable. They are class specific, which means if student A is in class A and student B is in class B, if they take a test and student A has an A and student B has a B, it means that these grades are not comparable because they are in different class environments and the grades are class specific. So it doesn't mean that the student who had an A in the one class is better than the student who had a B in the other class. Something else that came out as a result is that the grades say nothing about the progress that the students have made or the skills that they have learned. And they found out that good grades can motivate. They don't have to. And they also found out that bad grades do not motivate. This idea of a performance society, that we're living in a world where performance is important and it's important to measure it as early as possible, is a questionable argument, because as we have seen, or the results have shown, that the grades don't even measure performance accurately. So that's a big question mark there. And also what another result was that the argument that school grades have proven their worth in society and beyond, there's no factual evidence of that. What else do we know? We also know that there's no correlation between high school grades and academic success at college or university, which means just because you have a high score or SAT score doesn't mean that you will do academically or you will do well in college or university. The same is true. There's no correlation between academic success at college and or university and professional success. Just because you have a very good degree from college or university does not mean that you will be successful in your professional life. So that means a good or bad school grade or grade at university has no significance for the success of a student in their especially professional life. And now, what should we do with all this information? We could be frustrated, we could be angry, we could demand change, and we could try to replace grades. That these are things that are always discussed among parents and students and also teachers. I suggest that we just need a change of perspective. And what needs to happen, I think, or could help, is that students, parents, and teachers are aware and accept that grades are not fair or that they measure performance, and that we focus on what's really important. What is more important for success than grades? There are different aspects that are more important for an individual's success than the grades at school or at university, and that is knowledge that is not taught at school or university. Also important is that students can actually apply the knowledge that they have learned, so that they don't just memorize the knowledge and then reproduce it in a test, and then they get a grade for it, but they can actually use it in practice. Also more important than grades is the drive of students to develop their individual talents and skills, the willingness for students to train to be more perseverant. Also important is finding and using intrinsic motivation. And the last two I find are very important, that students live in harmony with their personal values and that they live a happy and fulfilling life. And in the next videos, I will go into more detail about these different aspects that I believe are more important than the grades at school.